Record on the computer. Okay, recording. Okay, I feel so technical tonight. I'm so excited. We are live on Facebook. We are recording. And what time? We are actually on, it's 6:29, y'all. We're doing excellent.
Yay. We learning a lot of technology in this COVID era.
Yes, indeed. I have an aunt in Louisiana who wants me to send her the link. Okay, so we got a few more minutes. If you know anybody who wants to hop on, just you can share the Zoom link, or it's also on Facebook Live. I'm gonna just double check that we're there too. Okay. So I'm gonna check both the chat box and Facebook for questions periodically. So we'll see how that goes. Okay. Okay, looks like we have 5 people on Facebook Live. 6. Okay, I'm just gonna make a note. Feel free to enter your questions. Okay, cool. All right, so we're gonna give it about 5 minutes for people to join. So I definitely just want to kick it off with a big thank you for joining us tonight, whether you're at home or still at work or on the road. We just appreciate your participation tonight. And this really should be interactive. I want this to be as engaging as possible. It's very important to talk about this. So I definitely want to make sure that we are covering everybody's questions. Okay, so a little bit about me. My name is Monica Smith, and my background is finance. So I've always worked in retirement planning for 20 years. I've worked for Fidelity Investments, TIAA Prep, PNC Investments, always in the realm of helping people save. And so now I wear 2 hats. I predominantly focus on insurance and financial consulting, and I also sell real estate. But in my experience, what I have found is that we really have to do better, okay, in terms of saving for retirement, preparing our families and loved ones. We really have to do better. And so I'm excited to have Tiffany on tonight to cover some critical information around estate planning, okay? And I will be doing some additional workshops around insurance. So you'll definitely see more around financial planning, how to set up a policy, doing policy reviews. Maybe you have a policy on your job that you have. You're paying a small premium for that, and really kind of seeing what is covered in that policy. Because you have to think, if you're the breadwinner, the house of cards falls, right? And it falls on whoever remains. So they still have to take care of home and keeping a roof over your head, and food and shelter and clothing and possibly school and all of that. So we really want to crunch the numbers and make sure that you have a solid plan in place in terms of saving and protecting your families. Also on that note, right now they've actually increased the amount that you can have in terms of coverage. You can actually get up to $3 million in coverage right now. The max used to be 2 million. Now it's bumped up to 3 million because there's just such a great need, especially going now with a global pandemic. So definitely reach out to me, inbox me if you'd like to set up a complimentary consultation for policy review. Happy to do that. Also, let's see what else. I made some notes here. But we'll kind of go back and forth. But I did pull up some stats, Tiffany. I went online, I checked AARP,
Okay.
And it is actually a fact that only 78% of, well, 78% of millennials do not have a will. Okay, and that's 18 to 36. So that ain't me. We are Generation Xers, okay, out here, 37 to 52. And 60% of Generation Xers do not have a will.
You said
Okay,
60, 60?
60% do not.
Okay.
So these numbers, we have to do something, people. So we definitely want to make sure that we're getting all of our questions answered tonight. And it's now 6:35. I want to go ahead and pass the baton to Tiffany. I'm so honored and so privileged to have you on tonight. Tiffany Veney, Esquire with the Griffin firm. They are a force to be reckoned with here in Prince George's County and the surrounding DC area, making a difference in folks' lives out here. So I'm just so honored to have you tonight, Tiffany. Take it away.
Thank you so much. I am honored to be here. It is a passion at the Griffin firm that we educate our community because of stats like that. People just don't have it. They don't understand the importance. They think that it's more daunting than it really is to get their estate plan done. A lot of people just push it off. So I'm excited to be here, and hopefully if anyone has questions, I have found my chat box, so it's up and ready. And then Monica, can you let me know if I missed anything? What I want to do is kind of just give you an overview of basic estate planning, what we call a foundational plan. And this is what you need at the age of 18. Those millennials at the age of 18, you need an estate plan. You need your first estate plan. Estate planning is not a static thing. It is dynamic. So it's going to keep changing. You got to keep reviewing it. And as your assets change, life changes, then so should your documents. So today I'm going to start with the basics, and then feel free to ask anything extra or tell me to clarify, but we'll start there. So there are 3 documents you need when you have a basic estate plan or foundational estate plan. 2 of them serve you during your life, and 1 of them serves you after you've passed. So we're going to start with the ones during your life. The first one would be the durable power of attorney. That is, in its most basic sense, is just a document that lets someone act on your behalf for your finances. So think of it, we call it like a super blank check, where they can pay more about the
parent. Talk a little bit about your team and when working with kids, because some of those kids.
Okay, I thought she was talking to me. So the durable power of attorney is for your finances. It'll be, they could pay your mortgage if you couldn't, they could file your taxes for you, they can, anything that you can do financially, they should be able to do for you. Most of the time, before COVID, when we saw power of attorneys used the most is when one of your loved ones has dementia and they don't always remember that their bills need to be paid, or they don't remember that they're supposed to be getting their Social Security check. So you have to call and follow up and make sure that your loved one is taken care of on the financial side. Since COVID, it's spiked just a little bit because it's not just dementia. Sometimes I know at the start of the pandemic, people got stuck in a whole different country. They couldn't come back, they couldn't manage their stuff. So if they had someone on the ground with that kind of authority, nothing would have been missed. When you're choosing your power of attorney, it's very important. Actually, any agent that you choose, it's very important to be thoughtful about it. You don't want to just choose anyone because you love them. You have to trust them, for one, because you're giving them a really huge rights over your property, right? And they have to be good at the job. You have to know what it entails and say who is the best person, what's the best fit. If they don't balance their own checkbook, they're surely not going to balance yours, and they're probably not the best choice. A lot of people, they just want to choose, oh, I'll just choose my kids. And I'm like, your kid is in debt. I don't know that that's the one you want to choose. And as lawyers, we have to be real, and we have to tell you, like, no, I don't think that's a good choice, and tell you why. So the power of attorney for your finances during your life, it dies when you die, and to be thoughtful about who it is you're choosing. Now, the healthcare power of attorney, most people know it as advance directive. There's a living will component. So people hear all these terms interchangeably. Advance directive and healthcare power of attorney are they're the same thing.
That's what you're executing. And it's for your health. The durable power of attorney for finances, and the other one is for your health. This is where you get to say what it is, how you want to be cared for when you're here, but you can't speak for yourself. When you're incapacitated for whatever reason, who should speak for you? That would be your proxy. And what should they be saying? I had one client who he really just like, you know, whatever my family wants. And I always encourage my clients not to do that. It's sort of like a God complex. You're leaving it up to one of your loved ones. You're putting that burden, because I've had the feedback that that's what it feels like, a burden to decide whether you live or die. And that's not the purpose of estate planning. The purpose of estate planning is to empower you to say what you want and how you want to live and what your quality of life looks like. And then through the healthcare power of attorney, you get to do that and say whether you want breathing tubes and ventilation, which is a huge thing now with COVID, and whether you want, if you do, for how long. If you know you've been in a coma for 3 years, do you want them to keep incurring the cost and the pain and suffering? Do you want to keep going through that? And you get to determine and write that down. And another thing that it does when you write it down yourself is it makes it so your family's not fighting. It creates a sense of peace for the family, that it's not them who decided this, it was your wishes, they're just carrying it out. And it really does save relationships, quite honestly. I've had clients who, she was appointed, her mom said, I want you to make the decision. She made the decision basing it on doctors and money, and her brother was not happy that she did what she did. Whereas if she had written it, the mom, saying, I don't want to be in this state with this zero quality of life for a set number of 6 months. If I'm still suffering, then let me go. So I think that that's really key when you're starting to think about these documents. For this document too, you have to be mindful about who you're choosing. I always give the example, and my mom, who may be watching on Facebook, she knows the story, she knows it's no secret. My mom is not my agent for my healthcare. I am my mom's only daughter, and I know my mom's emotional. She'd say, that's my only baby girl. No, you do everything you can to save her. Well, that's not what I want. I don't want to be with that kind of quality of life. So I chose my brothers, who I know could, separate the pain of where your sister is, like health-wise, and then make sound decisions. So that's what the kind of thing you really have to sit and think about, and make sure that you're choosing the best people for the job. Those are during your life. Now we get to after death. And this is what most people know about getting your affairs in order. It's your will, the last will and testament. Your will is where you get to appoint someone in charge when you have gone. And it's also where you get to say, who has my stuff? A little bit later on, I'll get to other important pieces of the will when I start answering some questions, but that's the basics of the will. You get to dictate who gets your stuff. If you don't do a will, technically there's already a will done for you. It's called the laws of intestacy. It's the government. The government gets to tell you, if you don't tell me what you want to happen to your stuff, I'll tell you. I'll tell you exactly how it should go. It's a basic formula. Essentially, it's like next of kin is the best way to think about it. That's who's in charge, and that's who gets all of your stuff. But for a lot of people, that's not what we want. We have blended families, especially, in our community, we have blended families. We have cousins who aren't really cousins, but we love them and want to give them something. We have nieces and nephews who we want to provide for. We have charities that we're involved in, especially there was a stat, another colleague of mine, Shakisha, I can't remember the stat, but a lot of millennials, they really care about their charities. So, their alma maters, they want to give back to Howard, and they want to give back to all of these charitable organizations. And if you don't have a will, you can't do that. The law does not allow you to say, hey, give this money here and here and here. It says it'll give it to next of kin. So that's the gist of a foundational plan. I'm going to put out commonly asked questions and answer them, and then I want to open it up for someone else. When you have property, do you recommend a simple will? So, hi, Monica. Thank you for your question. When you say property, do you mean real property like land and a house, or do you mean like personal property like cars and clothes and stuff? Okay, a house. So I always recommend a will. That's the one. Let me put that there. I always recommend a will. You always need a will. When you have a house, depending on what state you're in, I often recommend you have more than just a will. I recommend you have a trust and a revocable trust and it does a number of things. There's a number of reasons why, but yes, you need a will. It doesn't necessarily have to be simple, but it can be. And you might also benefit from more than just a will. So, frequently asked questions. I'm young, no kids, no assets. Why do I need a will? And I get that a lot because we started doing a lot of more millennial presentations, and that's the question, like, that's my reality. I don't have anything. So one of the things that I always say, and actually all of us say, you have a life. So you most certainly need a plan, and that plan includes a will. Specifically for the will, some of the reasons that I just outlined, you might not have a lot, but you have a car, you probably have a bank account, you have things that you want. And one of the things that I'd like people to know and I'd like to explain is that sometimes it's not about the money. It's not the money that people want. I know for a fact that when my mom passes, if we were ever going to fight, it wouldn't be over her money. It would be over the things that she's accumulated over her life that mean something to me. For instance, my brothers already know I put in my bid. I want all of my mom's Christmas decorations. It's probably worth literally nothing, but the fact that it's in her will that I get those is meaningful to me. So even if you don't think you have a whole lot of assets, like money, it doesn't matter. It's more than just money. So through your will, you get to do that. And on top of that, I've never met anyone who didn't own anything. I've never met anyone who didn't have a bank account that would need to be managed. I've never met anyone who didn't, have a life that meant something. So if you were killed by a drunk driver and now all of a sudden your estate financially is worth $100 million, I don't know where I got that number from, that's just random, but then you get to outline what you want to happen to that money. So peace of mind, your family knowing that these were your wishes and what you wanted to happen, making sure that you're taking into account more than just money. And if you have a little bit of money, but not a lot, and you don't have kids, but you want to give to charities or nieces and nephews, things like that. Those are all the reasons why you would need a will, even when you don't have a lot. Yes, the possessions, I'm telling you, families will fight over possessions. What's the difference between revocable and irrevocable? That's a trust. Revocable essentially is an extension of you. It's like its own entity, but it's still linked to your social security number. So when you put things into a trust, and think of it as a wagon, right? You have all these things. You have a house, a bank account, cell phones, and cars, and all of these things. And if you put them all into this little wagon, AKA your trust, when something happens to you, you have this little like instructions to say what you want to happen to all of your stuff. The key with it though, because if you think about it, a will does that too. The key with it is that you avoid probate. That's the key. When you pass away with or without a will, you go through probate unless you have other documents in place. Probate is the court process where your loved ones have to go down to court, say so-and-so died, here's her death certificate. If she had a will, here's her will. And they have to go through all of the steps of probate. It's costly in time and money, especially in COVID, because I know some of the jurisdictions we're dealing with are like 3 months behind. So imagine your loved one dying 3 months ago, and you still haven't been appointed to be able to close out their bank account. And imagine if you needed access to that bank account to pay for the funeral. Now you're in this crazy world where the funds are tied up. So we like to avoid probate. We don't want to go through that. And a trust, a revocable trust, is how you do that. There's no gap. There's no lack of access to the assets. The moment that that person passes, as long as their stuff is in the trustee simply takes the death certificate down to the bank and says, I'm successor trustee, I need to write a check for the funeral. And they say, okay, here are your checks. And you go forth and handle your business. So irrevocable trust, it's more like asset protection. We use irrevocable trust to protect or tax plan. And it can be another entity, just like the revocable, but there's like 30 something irrevocable. So it's hard to say exactly like, oh, the difference between this one and this one is this, you know what I mean? So a general difference between revocable and irrevocable is that you're giving up control, or you're giving up something in an irrevocable. You have to give up some sort of control, ownership, in order to gain the asset protection piece of it. So irrevocables, we don't use as frequently because people don't want to give up control. They want to be able to do what they want with their bank account, you know, take it in, take it out, whatever. And you can't really do that. There are restrictions with irrevocables. Probate is,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, quick question from Darla. She
Yes.
asked, if you have payable upon death on all of your bank accounts, do you still need a will?
Yes. Great question. And the answer is yes. You always need a will. You're never going to ask me a question. I say, oh no, you don't need a will. You absolutely do. And that was one of my frequently asked questions. Like, I have beneficiaries on all my stuff. Why do I need a will? Number one, you still should appoint someone because you never know what happens of what caused your death and why someone needs to be in charge to manage your estate. So number one, you need that. Number two, I'm a lawyer, which means I'm a professional pessimist and I see all of the bad things that happen. So we as lawyers plan for all the bad things we've seen. Payable on death is a beneficiary designation essentially, and they fail and you're not here to correct it. I have, let me see, I just thought of 3 probate cases right now where it failed. It didn't work the way that they wanted to. So now we have to go through probate, which was the whole purpose of the POD, to avoid going straight to them. And now we still have to go through it because it failed. Some reasons it fails is people forget to update them. Your beneficiaries, if the person who you left it to has passed, but you forgot to update your beneficiary, oftentimes it just reverts back to your estate and then you have to go through and figure out somebody else. Another instance is that, especially if you're leaving it to someone who's just as old as you are, then if you're elderly and you're leaving to another elderly person, it makes that probability higher. If you're leaving it to kids, then you have to be mindful of their age. With POD, you have no control. That's another beauty of the will or a trust. You can control it. For instance, I have minor kids. I'm not just going to name the payable on death beneficiary my kids because they're minors. Even if they were 18 and not technically minors, if I had an account with a lot of money in it, I'm not leaving that to no 18-year-old. They don't know what to do with it. So I want to control that. Maybe that's just me being controlling, but I also think it's mindful, especially as you start to learn your kids and learn your beneficiaries. If you're leaving it to your sister and you know she's sound, then it is what it is. I'm not saying that PODs fail all the time because they don't. Sometimes they are a really good tool and they can be used, and I do support them. However, you still need a will in the event that it fails. You have that safeguard. So you should always have a will. Another reason you always need a will, or for those people who think like, oh, I don't have much, is definitely for minor kids. If you have minor kids, you should always have a will and name someone who's in charge of your kids when you're not here, who's the guardian. Sometimes you just think, oh, it'll be, my spouse. But if something happens to you and your spouse together, then what? Who's getting your kids and who do you want? Question.
Okay, so on that note, or in that vein, let's say that you are a single parent and you co-parent, right? And maybe you have some arrangement in the courts in terms of visitation, things like that. How does that work if you don't have a will and you have a specified guardian? Does it automatically assume that then the guardian would be the other parent?
It can, and I have a case just like that. She had primary custody. Actually, she had sole custody. I don't know if I know it was sole physical. And I think she had sole legal. And because the dad was still living, the child is now with the dad. Now, that's also sort of a family law question, so keep that in mind. I'm not a family law attorney. This is not family law advice. None of this is legal advice. But yeah, and now the child is with the dad, which was not, he had visitation essentially. And that's not what she wanted. She didn't have a will. She didn't outline that she'd prefer her sister to be the one to take the kid. And the sister only has so much leg to stand on when there's a biological parent out there. So when you're a single parent, you have to be mindful of that and put those things in place. So that way, even if you aren't here, your kids are still cared for in the way that you want them to be cared for.
Exactly.
And another thing on that point, not just to name who is in charge of your kids, but say you were okay, say you had joint legal. So you trusted the dad, but the child just stayed with you, right? But you don't trust the dad with your money. If you don't do anything and appoint anybody as conservator for your kid's money through your will, then now dad gets all the money that was supposed to be for the benefit of the kid. And I know a lot of people who have, they're co-parenting well, but that doesn't mean they trust them. They still want their sister to be the one, okay, my kid's with him, but I want you to make sure you're paying for it. So you got to keep that kind of thing in mind as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, Tiffany.
Yes.
Hello, how you doing? My name is Ben. I have a couple questions and maybe taking a step back. So far, this has been great. I'm learning a lot. Let's take a step back because you kind of broke things down to 3 categories. And the categories that I received was durable power of attorney. And then number 2 was an advanced directive living will. And then number 3 was a post afterlife, which is the will and trust. Correct?
Last will and testament. Correct.
Last will and testament. Okay, so the last will and testament and the trusts are the last component. So it was a durable power of attorney, and that focuses on somebody who, like you gave a great example. Let's say you're stuck in Thailand and you have bills in Maryland. You have a durable power of attorney who can speak on your behalf for any affair, even though you're alive, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then you have the advanced directive, which is a living will, which is basically somebody who steps as a representative for your health, whether you are alive or not alive. I mean, when you are alive, I'm sorry.
Correct.
But they be incapacitated.
Or incapacitated. Now, I'm in the healthcare profession, so I know that if the person's able to speak for themselves, then that trumps the advanced directive, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then the last one was the living will and testament and trust, which is focused on after you have transitioned, where you kind of break down all your assets. Now, the will, it goes for probate, where people kind of have to go to probate to divide things up, as opposed to a trust where it's already outlined and there's no probate. It just goes to the executor of the trust.
Correct.
So you suggest, do I need a living will and testament if I just have a trust?
Yes. I told you the answer was always going to be yes, whether you need a
Last will and testament, even if you have a trust, they work together. The will structure looks different. A standalone will looks very different from what I would call, what is called a pour over will. So you'll have the trust and a pour over will, which doesn't have a whole lot of substance, but it still gives someone standing if something went wrong. Say someone did something wrong in the hospital and you died because of it. The will is what gives them standing to sue them. And then it says, if for any reason I forgot to put anything in my trust, or if for any reason I inherited something that I didn't know I had, and it goes to my estate, my executor from my will should give everything to my trust, so my trust still controls it, but you still make that bridge, you still link it, just in case. We're lawyers, we have to be mindful.
All right, and then this is the last, well, not the last question, but a question right now. So obviously this is a lot of information, right? So obviously we will come, I'm assuming your company will come to you and it's a consulting fee on establishing this. How do we go about getting all this executed?
Great question.
So in our world at the Griffin firm, I don't know how anybody else does it, how the Griffin firm, because you came to this event and started getting this education, the consultation with us is free. You're going to call TJ, who's our assistant, or Shania, and you're going to say, hey, I need to get on the calendar. And then you're going to come in and you're going to have and sit down with us. You could also go there. We give free workshops every month, which is a little bit more in depth than what we're covering here. So you get even more education and then come in and sit and have a free consultation. And when we get to the consultation stage, I get in your business. That's the bottom line. No sugarcoating it. I get in your business. I figure out what you have, what's important to you, what your goals are, what prompted you to get estate planning. And then I start to create a plan based on those goals. So you tell me what you want to achieve and I tell you how to do it legally.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, Tiffany.
No problem. I forgot what I was saying. We were talking about trust. We were talking about last will and testaments. I think I touched on it, but I'll touch on it just to be sure. A lot of people want to know what happens if I just don't do anything. What can happen if I do nothing? And it depends on what stage of life you're in. So if you're alive and you do nothing, and for some reason you need someone to act on your behalf for any reason, finances or health, and no one has that authority, and you don't have the capacity to give that authority, then you're in guardianship and conservatorship with the court. It's a court process. Guardianship and conservatorship, again, just like probate, anything with the government is always costly in time and money. And you have to go through an actual court hearing to have someone appointed. The court takes it very seriously, as well they should, because essentially what guardianship does is it strips that person of their rights. They no longer can go to their bank. I had a client who was the guardian for her dad, and he didn't understand, because he had dementia, that he couldn't go to his bank anymore and do anything. He didn't understand how he didn't have control over his own money. And that is a very huge thing to do to someone. So the court doesn't make it easy. You just can't get guardianship willy-nilly. So you have to go through a hearing, there's a trial, you have to present all the evidence of why this person needs it, and then you go forth and become guardian. And then each year you have to file all your reports, and you just have to continue to report to the court so that they can make sure that that person's protected. So that's what happened if you do nothing, like a POA, like a power of attorney, or a healthcare advance directive. If you do nothing on the will side, if you just don't do a will, like I said, the government has one for you. And what it'll say is who's in charge. It'll tell you who's in charge, as opposed to you telling the government who's in charge. And it's usually next of kin, spouse, kids. I'm going to pause there because I had a client who has been estranged from her husband for like 20 years. They just don't believe in divorce, so they just live apart. But if she passed without a will, he has priority, and he could be in control of her estate because legally he's the spouse. I had a case like that where the spouse thought he got divorced, but he just never went through it. So he's thinking his sister is going to be in charge of everything. And the wife popped up and was like, nope, I'm the wife and I get everything. And he had no will. And I had to tell my client that there was nothing I could do for her legally, that she has no legal ground to stand on. She was like, she hasn't been there. I took care of him. I was like, I get that. But she's a spouse and he doesn't have a will. So we are where we are. So if you do nothing, those are things that can happen. They'll appoint next of kin, whomever that may be, whether you like them or not, and they will give all of your stuff to next of kin, essentially. If you didn't want to give it to next of kin and you'd rather it go to someone else without a will, you don't have a choice. And then without a will, oftentimes, even with a will, who am I kidding? Fighting can happen. People who don't think that they would fight end up fighting. I have a case right now. I just talked to her today. She never imagined that she would fight her brother. And this gentleman had a will and a trust, and the brother's still fighting. And wills and trusts are, when they're drafted well, they stand up in court, but it doesn't mean that anyone can't sue or challenge it. You can sue and challenge whatever you want in America. And the person who's left behind still has to defend it. They have to go to court and say, no, this was validly done. This is what he wanted. And you have to go through this turmoil, sometimes even with it. So imagine without it, how much more challenging it is when there isn't even a will. The other thing that I like to point out that a will does, two things. When someone dies, and they don't have a trust, and if they don't have a will, if their estate is worth, say the value of all of their assets when you add it up is worth $500,000, the person who wants to be PR has to post a bond, which is like insurance, unless all of the heirs agree not to. So that sometimes that insurance premium called bond, you can pay, I've had a bond premium upwards of $1,900. So you would have to pay the court technically not the court, the bond company, $1,900 just to get access to the deceased person's stuff and be appointed. Everyone doesn't have $1,900 just lying around. So with your will, you can waive it and say, my executor does not have to do that. I'm telling them that that's who I want to be it, and they don't have to pay all of this stuff. That's one of the other benefits of it. The other thing is a will can help reduce taxes. If you have the right provisions in your will and or your trust, you can help reduce some of these estate taxes. And someone mentioned inheritance tax. Maryland, if you're a Maryland resident, absolutely has inheritance tax. There are exemptions, so it's not everybody. And I think DC's laws changed, so you don't have inheritance there. But depending on your jurisdiction, you really can get hit with inheritance tax, and it can be upwards of 40%. Estate taxes, especially as we get rid of this administration and bring in a new one, that'll change. So your will and your trust help you to try to control that and keep more money in the family versus giving it in taxes. Okay. Okay, so those were the questions that I wanted to make sure I hit. Was just, I don't think I need a will, but you know, what happens if I don't? Question?
Yeah, so something that comes up in terms of like assets, right? You immediately think of the house.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say a spouse passes and it's really on that surviving spouse to maintain. And they usually have to notify the lender that, you know, they have to send in the death certificate. Would the surviving spouse have to qualify for that mortgage to maintain? Let's say she's getting or he's getting an additional, you know, they're going through the motions of drawing down their 401k or, you know, other assets out there. Would they then have to qualify to stay in that home?
So the answer is that it depends. I'm such a lawyer tonight. The answer is always it depends. And truthfully, it depends on the lender. It depends on what that mortgage says. Sometimes the way the mortgage is structured, it is very dependent upon both salaries, both people. And when one is gone, especially what you're going to talk about, if you don't have any insurance to help supplement, then yes, that spouse could have to requalify for the bulk, what's left on that mortgage. So it really does depend. And that's part of our process is I make you call your mortgage company and ask these questions. I also make it you call and ask what happens when both spouses die. The people who you've left behind, do they have to requalify? Can they just assume the mortgage at the same rate? It really does depend. And it is so important to ask those questions because people kind of just think like, oh, when one dies, it's just me and I'm fine. And that's not the case. You have to really read that fine print. So it depends.
Okay, perfect. And like you said, I'm happy to help with any insurance questions you have because that's the purpose of the policy, to be able to maintain those type of expenses. Another question that popped up in terms of debt, right? Any outstanding debt, whether it's student loans, car, automobile loans, what happens to that debt? Credit cards.
Right, good question. And this is a general because it's always case by case and it depends on what your particular paperwork says. But generally, your debt is your debt. When you pass away, if you owed people, none of the people you leave behind are responsible for your debt. Your estate is. So in a way they kind of are, but if I had $50,000 in my bank account when I died and we go through probate and I owed $30,000, then that $30,000 goes and gets paid. If I had $10,000 and owed 30, then the people who are owed 30 just get what they can. They can't come after my people. Now, keep in mind, if you co-signed, that's a whole different ballgame. That's your debt too. If
Right.
you if it's usually just co-signing. Like if you're on the debt as well, then you're just as liable as the person who's deceased. But as a general rule, the deceased person's debt is their debt and you are not responsible to come out of your own pocket with it. Sometimes I've actually encouraged it. For instance, when you pass away, you have a mortgage. Just because the mortgage holder passed away does not stop foreclosure. It doesn't mean that the bank can't foreclose on that property and say 3 payments haven't been made. I want my house back. So I've often told them while we're going through the probate process and trying to get you appointed, pay that mortgage. you can get reimbursed on the back end. But
Right.
if you don't come out of pocket with it, they will foreclose with no problem. They don't care that the person died. They just want their money. So I do encourage that. And I also would encourage people, I had it happen one time. I don't know if it was just that one fluke mortgage company. They wouldn't accept the payments. The family wanted to pay with their own money and they would not accept the payments. And they wanted to go through foreclosure and get the fees and attorneys,
Wow.
interest and stuff. And it was really, really sad because they were actually trying to pay, keep it up to date. And the mortgage company was like, nope, no. So that's a whole mess of a mess. I see a question that popped up. Can you contest a POD? The answer is you can always contest anything. America's amazing. And you can sue, fight, contest, whatever you want. Now, will it stand? Maybe not. If you were going to contest a will or even a POD, you have to have a really strong leg to stand on. You have to have really solid medical proof that that person was not of sound mind when they executed the POD, the will, or they were under duress, or they, had no understanding of what they were signing. You have to be able to prove that. If you can't prove that, then of course you could contest it, but you're not going to get anywhere. Monica, I don't think I understand. It says a minor child exists. What's the question?
In regards to what you were saying, you have to have a really good reason.
Yes, you have to have a good reason to, well, no, rephrase. You don't have to have a good reason to contest. You have to have a good reason to make your contest win. So you don't have to, you can just believe that, like if you left a POD to your cousin and your son was like, my mom wouldn't do that. In his mind, that's a good enough reason, and he could sue all he wanted, but that's not a good enough reason to make it stand. And having a minor child and outlining someone else as a POD is not a good reason to win a contest.
Mm.
That's not something that's gonna, highly unlikely that it will hold up, that, this bank account should be for their minor child and they've outlined, this person. That's not gonna go that far.
Another question was, how frequently should they update their will? Is that just based on changes in the accounts or changes in marital status, things like that?
Good question. A general rule of thumb is every 3 years. The Griffin firm way is every year. We call it your planiversary, and we call you and say, do you still like the same people? What's changed? So you should revisit yearly, because sometimes things that have changed in your life, you don't realize they affect your plan. And then absolutely, if life changes have happened, you should, change it. Having kids, getting divorced, even getting more assets, because one of the things, when we recommend a plan to someone, we look at your goals, we look at your assets, and I don't always push a trust on people. Trusts are expensive. I'm not always just going to say, oh, you need that. But as I watch your estate change, I'm like, hey, I think it's about time you need to switch. And I'm going to tell you why. We missed it this year. COVID has kind of screwed something up. So we're aiming for the start of next year, where we do changes in laws, because the laws change, as we all know. With each administration, something changes. So your will this year is fine, and then next year it might not be. They might have changed something that we got to now edit because of the way the laws are. So from the Griffin firm way, every year, or as major things change in your life, is when you should review.
Any other questions so far? Feel free to put it in the chat box.
From my end, I think I called out all of them. So there was something else that I wanted to share. I don't know. Well, if there are no questions, I think I've shared most of everything. This is just a small portion of how important estate planning is, and making sure you're prepared, and making sure that even if you think you have nothing, that you've at least planned and been thoughtful, and you continue to do it. And okay, so I am not licensed in Florida. We do have what we call professional relationships, like synergy partners, that we can refer you out to. We as a firm are not licensed in Florida. We're licensed in DC and Maryland, and soon to be Virginia. One of our law clerks, she took the bar, and we're believing God that she will be a Virginia barred attorney, so we'll be the DMV. And then any other, most of the times if you come to us and you need an estate planning attorney who's in another jurisdiction, sometimes we can work out sort of like a co-counsel situation where we help you, but we always have that licensed professional, so we're not doing anything untoward. And then, yes, I can leave my firm information. I don't know how to do that though. Do I type in the chat box?
I can do it.
Okay.
We also have another question from Darla. When you have a will, what is the role of the executor? So we've heard executor and administrator. Can you go into more detail about that?
So depending on what state you're in, what jurisdiction, and they call it different things. In Maryland, it's called a personal representative. In Georgia, they start to call it administrator, but personal representative and executor are the same thing. It's just a term of art, really. And their role depends on what your will says. Their role primarily would be to file with the appropriate court saying that you've passed and process your will. So they move it through the court, and if you've put distributions, like you don't have a trust and everything's moving through the court, then it's their job to file all the appropriate paperwork, to make the distributions, to pay the debts, to close all the accounts, and go through the whole process of sort of closing out someone's financial life. And that's their primary goal. So that's another reason to be really thoughtful about who you choose. I had a lady who, they were old, so the people that she knew were old, and it was very burdensome for her elderly friend, actually I think it was a cousin, to have to go to court and fill out all these papers, which is why they hired us to do most of the legwork, but they still want to understand what they're doing, as well they should. So we have to sit and explain it to them what this form does and why we need it. And then they are the ones who end up with the authority. So we can't go to the bank and say, please close out this account. The executor does. They're going to the banks, they're calling the life insurance and filling out the forms, and they're literally getting checks and writing checks, and this debt came in, so you got to pay that. That's their role, is to close out your financial life. And sometimes it can be burdensome.
You have that question?
Yes. So Ebony, is there any reason that the estate will still go into probate even if you have a will? Yes, all wills go through probate. You have to move. A will doesn't avoid probate, it directs probate. A trust can help you move outside of probate. Beneficiary designations can help you move outside of probate, but a will alone is what directs probate, as opposed to probate directing you. You're welcome.
Great questions.
It is, I love it.
Okay. Let's see. Any type of like checklist that you would give to someone who is preparing to do like a consultation with you? What type of documents should they be collecting?
So we have what we call an estate inventory, and it makes you sit down and start to think about your goals and your financial life. Okay. You list all of the assets you have, your bank accounts, your life insurance, all your retirement accounts, your cars, house, property, inherited or expected inherited property. So if you know your mama in North Carolina has a property that's going to be heir property, thinking about that and being mindful of it. And we even think forward thinking about businesses. If you have a desire, like eventually I'm trying to open this business, what does that look like? So those are all the things that are on estate planning inventory. And then we start to think about other stuff besides just the money. So what are your goals with estate planning? What do you hope to achieve? We're really focused on legacy in our wills. And you know what, I should have mentioned that. In our wills and our trust, especially if you do like a testamentary trust within your will or something like that, it's not just about the stuff, which I've said. When like my trust, the way it's set up, it's not just how does the money go for my minor kids. I want my values to pass along. I want what's important to me. So my kids, if you keep a 3.0, then the trust will help you pay for your college. If you just gonna go in there and squander, I'm not paying for you to sit in college for 4 years and get a 1.2. No, ma'am. So my values matter through my trust, and I instill it in, you know what I mean? Like my values are in there, in the document. So my trustee makes sure that my kids have these values. Even something like incentivizing work through your trust. If you get a summer job, guess what? The trust will match what you make. So it encourages you to work harder. It encourages, even financial stuff. So one of the part of my trust is you have to have an estate plan. The trust will pay for it, but you are going to get an estate plan at 18 and you're going to pay attention and get it updated. You have to take like a financial literacy course so you understand the importance, not just from me teaching you the value of $1 because we've all worked hard, but I want you to get a leg up, but not lose the lessons. You know what I mean? And through estate planning, I can make sure you learn those lessons, even if I'm not here to teach them to you.
Nice.
Yeah.
Quick question from Monica. How do you make your property air property?
So air property is funky. The general rule of air property, or the general concept of air property, is that kind of property. It's always in the South. I don't know why, where Big Mama had it and they think that it just goes through generations and it just passes down automatically. And that's not the case. Air property, when you have it and it's just in the family and you just keep on doing it, you still have to have that legal paperwork to show. And that's what air property is, where you've just sort of inherited it, but it's not a legal thing. And then what we have to do is end up going in and opening all these probates to properly transfer all of this air property. So that's the general idea of air property. Now, how do you make it air property, meaning last for generations through years? Trust. I know I sound like a broken record, but it's the truth. They are a great tool. And you can put your property in trust and you can say what happens. Now, keep in mind, no trust can last forever under the law, but it can last for generations. And if you do it right and instill the values as well, then it encourages the next generation and the next generation to just keep it going and keep it in trust and keep it, turn it into an investment property, income producing, anything like that. So generally, that's how you do it.
Question. So when talking about real estate and property, a lot of times, just like you mentioned, people inherit homes and they will, it appears that families aren't really having these conversations. Like the assets that are accumulated, that is the family business, right? And so we should be operating like a business in terms of business continuity. How are we maintaining these assets? So instead of having to decide to sell, right, and everybody gets their share, and which ends up at the Cadillac car lot, okay?
Hello. Yes, ma'am.
So, in terms of, this is something that we can start having these conversations now while everything is, for the most part, good, right? We're not waiting for somebody to be on a sick bed or, incapacitated, but have these conversations today in terms of what legal documents that we need to put in place to make sure that the property stays in the family, i.e. trust or something like that.
You're spot on that the conversations don't happen. And they either don't happen because people don't know to have the conversation or they don't want to. A lot of elderly people don't want to talk to the younger generation. They think this is my stuff. I'm going to do what I want to do. And that's it. And then some people have conversations, but they're not having them in depth enough. They don't really know the way to do it. So definitely having conversations and putting it out there to a professional is always going to be my advice to make sure that you can make informed decisions. So if you talk to a professional and they can walk you through that.
So for example, let's say, all this property in DC, right, which was at once upon a time Chocolate City, they got a little latte, and now it's changing. So if we had these conversations, right, about how to keep up the property taxes, and that could have been put in a trust, right? If the family members know, hey, we want to maintain this property, keep it in our bloodline, you know, we can set up funds that maybe everybody pitches in, or it was originally funded, right? Is that, you know, something that can be done or set up?
Absolutely, and we do it all the time. And we don't just do it for those like heir properties that you know you're going to inherit. We do it for our clients' primary residence. Like when you pass away, what is your goal? And then we help you think about all the pitfalls that you didn't. So who do you want to get it? Okay, great. Who's paying the property taxes? Where's your mortgage held? We ask all those questions of the mortgage company to understand. Then we help link you with financial professionals like yourself to say, okay, my kid is 22. He's not really going to be in a place if I pass away. What kind of tools can I have to help fund the trust? Amy, who is the owner of our firm, she always says, I can write you the best estate plan, but it's always better if there's money in it. So we work with other financial professionals to think about those. Do you need a property management company? We never encourage Black people to sell property because we know that wealth is there. We don't want you to. We want you to create an income property. We want you to live in it if you need a home. We want you to recognize that there is wealth there, and how do we maximize that? Some families, it's an inherited property and it's just a trust focused solely on that property and what it looks like to rent it out and turn it into a business. Most of the times the conversation is mainly just around, if I pass away and my kids can't take care of this house, how are we doing that for them? How are we making sure our trust is set up in a way that they're good? And the other beauty of trust work, not just on paying land taxes, because they will take your house if you don't pay your taxes, and the mortgage, is also once in the trust, there's third-party creditor protection. So if the house is in the trust and your son wants to live there and, you know, maybe pay a portion of rent or something, or just pay utilities and taxes, and he marries poorly, that house is not marital property and it's not going to go to her family now because they didn't work out. So you get those benefits, and part of the process with us is having those conversations and talking it through and trying to figure out logistically, what does it look like? Who's paying what and from what pot of money? We also encourage, even if you're not turning into a rental property, either insurance, we encourage growth accounts. So that way there's always money in the trust to satisfy these, and being very clear about, you know, how to do that and minimize taxes. That's always our goal.
That is definitely a big goal. Now for folks who may have already, you know, set something up on LegalZoom, right? They created their own will. I mean, how effective is, you know, writing up your own will online?
I'd like to say that something is better than nothing. I'd like to say that, and I don't know if I can. I have rewritten a number of LegalZoom ones. I think it could be good if the directions are followed. Most of the times we see LegalZooms and it's a fillable form that they've downloaded. And on the form itself, it says, do not handwrite. Simple instruction, but people don't know it. So they write their whole will out and they think it's solid. And I'm like, that's not going to hold up in court. So a will got thrown out in one of my cases. I was like, that's not a valid will. I can present it to the court for you, but that's not a valid will. So I don't like LegalZoom for that reason, because there's no professional there to tell you what's legal and what's not, what you can do, what you can't do. Again, sometimes I like to think it's better than nothing, but truth be told, in that instance, it wasn't better than nothing. It was the exact same thing as nothing. So I don't support them. I mean, they're going to make their money. No, we don't. We like you to talk to a professional to know, hey, I did this LegalZoom will. Is it legal? Did I do it right? Or at the very least, read the instructions.
Right.
At the very least.
So,
and here's a tip for anyone who thinks that they want to write their own will. Tip number one, type it out, sign it in front of 2 witnesses. That's the standard for a legal will in Maryland, DC. It has to be witnessed by 2 people who are not listed in the will. And if you type it, don't handwrite on it. Keep it all type. The only handwriting should be your signature and the witnesses. If you go in and try to edit or you're invalidating your will. So don't do that.
Okay. You see that question there?
So If you write a will and have it notarized, no, that's not enough. It has to be witnessed by 2 individuals who are 18 and over and not included in the document. We notarize as another step. It's not required, but we like it to be notarized. But if it's only signed and notarized, that is not a valid will in Maryland.
I have
And
another
then-
question.
Go ahead.
So in terms of the wills and trust, and we have someone who wants to know just ballpark figure, what's the range in terms of the cost behind setting up a will and setting up a trust?
I like that question because I never like people to be sticker shocked when they come to us. We are not the cheapest people on the block, and we don't want to be. That's not my desire. If you want cheap, go to LegalZoom. Our ranges go from $1,000 for a foundational plan, the 3 documents we talked about, $1,000 all the way up to like, I think it's $18,000 at this point. So when I sit and talk to you at your consultation, we'll sit and figure out what your goals are and what you're trying to do. And then I'll tell you where you fall in that range. It's a huge range, I know. Whoops, sorry. The average plan, like an average trust plan, is around $5,000, $5,500. So it really does depend. The ones that are on the upper end are ones where we're doing a lot of business planning, we're doing a lot of tax planning or something like that. So that's our range.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Wait, there's a question. Aaron?
Oh, he wants to know we're
Plan.
doing more seminars.
We are, aren't we?
Yay. Yes, Aaron, thank you so much. This was honestly, it is a lot of information, so we definitely want to do a part 2. And if there's certain things or certain topics you want to, oh, he put the clap. Go, Aaron. If there's certain things that you want to cover or certain things that you may be curious about, drop it in the chat or just shoot us an email. And I'll make sure to put Tiffany's email and I'll put mine as well. Thank you.
Oh, blended families. Oh, honey, yes. That comes up. I am drafting a plan. Literally right before we logged on, I was drafting a plan for a blended family. He has a child with a previous wife and a child with the current wife, and trying to make sure through his trust that the current wife can't cut out the child of the other mother. And it's always interesting and trying to make sure everyone feels protected. The new wife doesn't feel ousted, the new child doesn't, the other, like the former child doesn't. And it really is being really thoughtful. We sit and strategize and figure out, even on the financial side, working with his financial planner to say, okay, we're gonna leave this asset to this spouse, because you know you can't disinherit your spouse, right? So in most jurisdictions, you can't disinherit your spouse and say, I'm not gonna leave them anything, I wanna leave everything to my children. That's a nice thought, but no. So trying to figure out, especially with the new elective share laws, and trying to make sure that the spouse gets what she's legally entitled to or he's legally entitled to, but all the kids are still provided for, and what that provision looks like. But yeah, blended families is a tricky one. Oh my gosh, I love it. Sorry, were you saying, I'm sorry. You were about to say something.
I think in recent, months, we've heard about Chadwick Boseman, passing away without a will, and celebrities like Prince and
Aretha.
who's that?
Aretha. She didn't
Aretha.
have. They said that eventually they found like handwritten wills in the couch or something like that. I was like, good Lord. And at first, when it first happened, we were like, she could plan 4 different wardrobe changes, but she couldn't write her will. And we were like, oh my Lord. But yeah.
It's nuts. So I think, it just goes back to, people think they have time, and you just never know. And even since the beginning of COVID, I can look to neighbors, to family members, friends, where we are losing people. And it's not just the COVID, we're just losing people. And you think you have all this time, and we just don't know. We don't know the day, we don't know the hour. So, we just have to be prepared and educated.
Correct. Education is definitely key. And the reason it's called estate planning is because it's just that it's a plan for what if, when this happens, are we ready? Have we planned and thought it out? And that's another reason why it's dynamic and you're not just going to have one plan. Things change, plans change. So I think platforms like this and trying to get the word out, and anyone who's listening who knows someone else who could benefit. I know you said recording. I don't know how or if you're like distributing it, but I know it's on Facebook. You guys should pass it along, get the information out there, and make sure that everyone you know and love knows how important estate planning is.
Well, this is so valuable, and just checking to see if there's any other questions before we wrap up. It's just about 7:34. But this is just something we've got to do. We got to do a better job. It's like too many times you see folks who can't even afford to bury folks out here.
Amen. Yep. Now, I want to ask a question of you, and because one of the things that I've learned over the years of doing this is the importance of collaboration, right? Like I said, I can write the estate plan. I can't make sure you have money in it. I can't help you do that kind of aspect. So we have this concept called PBOD, where it's personal board of directors, where we know we need an insurance professional to tell me all the tips and tricks and tools of insurance. And I've been learning so much more. So I'd love it if you could give us just an overview of insurance and all the things that it could do for us, and the fact that it's not just a death benefit.
Well, thank you so much for asking me. So, again, like I shared earlier, I've been in retirement planning for 20 years, and we are underinsured. We are underfunded in our retirement plans, and we're not realistic about what it takes to retire comfortably and make sure our families are okay. And so when you look at insurance, it's an excellent tool to save a nominal amount of money, just a small premium each month to cover assets that it would be very difficult to generate. So for example, if you were to put away $40 a month, right? That's a cup of coffee, during the week. You put away $40, depending on your age, I could buy you up to $300,000, $400,000 worth of life insurance coverage, right? And so which one is more realistic? Paying $40 a month or saving up $400,000? I submit to you that it's easier to put away $40 a month. And it's just that simple. Now, there's several different policies, whether you go term. And term is really saying, I just want to make sure I have X number of dollars if something should happen to me in this allotted time, whether that's 10 years, 20 years, or more. So it can expire, and it will expire. So you have the option to renew that. You have the option of going permanent, which is whole life. It's more expensive because there's a cash value there. Now, when you look at how you're saving, most of your accounts are taxable. Your savings account is taxable. Your retirement accounts, your 401ks, 403bs, 457s, all of those are taxable accounts unless you've made Roth contributions. Roth simply meaning after tax, which means it comes out tax-free. But generally speaking, most people are electing to do pre-tax contributions, which means it's taxable upon distribution. What are the taxes? It's 20% federal. Here in the state of Maryland, 7.75. If you're under the age of 59 and a half, there's a 10% early withdrawal penalty. So again, they get you. Uncle Sam will get you. So you look at all these different plans where you're like, okay, I have taxable money. Where's the non-taxable? That's where insurance comes in. You can you're essentially leaving a legacy for your family tax-free, guaranteed. Okay. So we need to stop sleeping on it. It's how the wealthy become wealthier. They take the cash out of these policies. They buy real estate in multiple cities. They generate income through rentals, and they're building their real estate portfolios off of life insurance, and it's tax-free. Okay, so again, that's something that we just have to do a better job of in terms of getting educated about that. There's other policies like index universal life policies, where essentially that has a cash accumulation. You can save for retirement, and you can also use it if something should happen to you, right? Chronic illness. terminal illness. And so this is money that you can draw down to help you offset medical expenses, things like that. So again, and that's money that you're getting tax free. So again, there's a wealth of information out there. You know, business owners, if I have some business owners on here, you are funding everything. There is no sick leave. There is no 401k unless you create one, right? So again, insurance is a tool that you can use to leverage, right? And there's policies like a key person policy. If something happens to them, how does the business go on? How do people get paid? How do bills get paid, right? So those are policies. But again, I really want to go back to families. We need to have the mindset that this is a family business. Whatever real estate you have, to make sure that it's staying in the family, and this is building and generating wealth for the next generation. Okay. When I've talked to several different people, different cultures, and the conversations are just different. Okay, when you go to Montgomery County, right? Yeah, so the conversation is a little different. Where they, well, we want to put some money aside for, Joanne's wedding, right? And we want to put some money aside for their first house. And we want to make sure, the little ones have a trust. We just want to make sure. That's Montgomery County, okay? My county, what kind of traffic? My county, there's different conversations, Tiffany. Okay, different kind of conversations. And we have to do better. And so a shortcut is insurance, right? That really kind of puts a button on it. And okay, what do we need to cover? We need to cover this mortgage so we keep the roof over our heads. We may need to cover, monthly expenses now that there's been a loss of income, a loss of wages. We need to talk about those things. We need to have a plan. Transition is a part of life, okay? And so we can't be afraid of it. We just have to have a plan for it. And that's insurance.
I have another question, and this is me being selfish because this is a true question for me.
Okay.
What's your advice for the retirement planning and stuff for someone who's 60 and has done not one iota of planning?
Is it just a matter of like, how do they, especially in COVID, say you find yourself unemployed because of COVID, what's the recommendation from an insurance standpoint or a retirement standpoint? What do they do? What do you do at the age of 60 with nothing? And now you're on Social Security or picking up odd end jobs. What do they do?
That's a real question. And, if I was being funny, I would say go on itsourtime.com and find your little, sugar, but that's not what we're doing out here. You have to really have an open mind. So let's say a lot of people are attached to their home and they want to stay in their home, but maybe that's when the money was good. So they may have to downsize, right? They may need to rent a room. They need to reach out to family. And really figure out, how can I reduce my expenses now that I'm on this fixed income? They may have to go to the state and figure out if there's any additional resources there. I would also look at, when you're planning to retire, consider relocating to a place that's more cost efficient or is cheaper to live. So people move to Florida. Why? Because they don't tax your retirement in Florida. They don't tax it. In Texas, they don't, I think it's not taxed, like if it's military income. So there's different areas, parts of South Carolina that people move to, they find out where they're not taxing their retirement and they go there and they relocate. So keep an open mind on where you can live for less, and stay in good health, in terms of, especially our community where we suffer from diabetes, hypertension. Our medical is what wipes out our savings. That is the key indicator for bankruptcies, is the cost of medical care. So it's, I would say hopefully they're in good condition, they stay healthy. And prevention is key. So again, when you're talking about cutting back and you're on a fixed income, a lot of times, especially if they have family nearby, their family may have to pitch in and support. And I've seen it in my own family where I had an aunt, she's no longer here, but she took care of my grandmother until my grandmother died. So she literally was the only sibling that stayed home in Louisiana, rolled her hair every night,
What?
every single night, rolled her hair every night, and until my grandmother died when she was 90.
Amen. That's a long life.
Okay.
That is a long life.
That's on life. And so because she made sacrifices, family was there to support her when she ended up having a stroke and had to go to a nursing home. So family members had to, pull together to make sure she was taken care of because she took care of our matriarch.
Right. That's amazing.
Yeah. So again, don't burn your bridges. Don't burn your bridges.
Okay, all my day.
Okay. Be nice to your family because they may be taking care of you someday. It's real. But yeah, that's a real question. And then, I'm of the mindset of cooperative economics. So for example, I laugh about this, but Golden Girls, whole bunch of single ladies, almost single ladies, and they lived together, and they were in the same space of life, right? So again, it's not crazy to think, if I'm 65 and I'm out here single and ain't nothing happening, I might as well move in with Mildred. You make lasagna, I make chicken. I mean, it just kind of makes sense. And especially if Mildred she inherited her house, she's good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and break Mildred off, $500, $700. We make this thing work. But that's what people need to start thinking about, right?
Agreed. You do have to be creative when the time arises. There's a question that says, what's the oldest age you can get insurance?
So you can get insurance beyond the age of 60. But I will say, for example, I mentioned this at the top of the session tonight. Right now, if you're under the age of 50, you can get up to $3 million in coverage without a medical exam. But over 50, you will need to take a medical exam. So this is why they say get insurance early before you have any pre-existing conditions, i.e. Cancer, diabetes, any other, health issues. So it could be more expensive. I promise you, it will be more expensive the longer you wait to purchase coverage because they take into consideration your weight, any health conditions you have, your family history. In my family, we are prone for diabetes. Folks have had cancer, high blood pressure. So again, they look at that, and everyone has some sort of family history when it comes to medical issues. So you can get coverage. It's just going to be super expensive the older you are. So again, just give me a call or inbox me if you have questions or if you know someone else who's kind of just wondering how much they could get in insurance. For example, I have a lady tonight. I spoke with her earlier. She's 67. She had a term policy she bought 20 years ago. It's about to expire, and it was for $150,000 of coverage. So it's going to go poof. It's going to go poof in a couple of months. So she says, well, what can I get? So we did a quote, and this is before it goes to underwriting. But right now, she did $200 a month in a term policy that would give her $150,000 coverage today. So I'm sure at 47, it was cheaper, right, to get that same coverage. Now it's going to be more because she's older. But hopefully that answers your question. Just about anybody can get insurance. It's really going to be based on age and any pre-existing medical issues. Now, Ben, you mentioned COVID. One thing that I've sat in on several different seminars around this. Right now, they're not looking at COVID as a condition to draw down for medical care. So for example, like chronic illness, until if there's something you know, how they're saying it's like difficulty with breathing, unless it turns into some sort of chronic issue, it's not currently covered in terms of COVID.
Wow.
Hopefully that answers your question. Okay.
Hey, Monica, can you hear me? It's Ben.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, so when I say COVID, that's what I was trying to figure out. Are they still debating whether that is a pre-existing condition or not? So you're
As of right
saying
now,
that
it's not.
it's not a pre-existing condition.
Correct. It's
Okay.
not. It's not recognized as a as part of that list. As you know, like they have a laundry list
That,
of other conditions, but that's not on the list. They said, you know, in small fine print, if there's chronic illness that, you know, comes down the road, they may consider it. But as of right now, it's not.
so you would advise right now, if you don't have life insurance, you should get it now or some insurance, because there's possibility that COVID can become
A chronic illness.
because we don't know enough about COVID yet to determine the ill effects in the future.
Absolutely. And you know, in terms of insurance, everything is the volume is up. People are concerned. I mean, you know, I know depending on what part of the country you're at, you're either on lockdown or you're going to happy hour like ain't nothing changed. And you know, half off appetizers, half off calamari and Corona. How about that? Half off. Everything's half off. And we don't know. The numbers are climbing, and it's better to have coverage now while you know you're in good health, and you can keep your premiums down. It just makes sense.
This is maybe my last comment. You know, these seminars have been great. The one that struck me next that kind of would tie into what you were just talking about with insurance is like 401ks, the difference between Roth IRA. Now there's the new I've heard of Roth IRAs, I mean Roth 401ks, which is different from 401ks, and then there's now the health spending 401k. Like there's so many 401k off Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs, backdoor conversions. So I think maybe we can do one of those to come into, like, I know there's at least 5 or 6 of those that we can start breaking those down. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea, and we will definitely be back, same bat channel, to do a retirement seminar, because what again, and I did retirement for 20 years for major Fortune 500 companies, and there's so many things that people just don't understand in terms of pre-tax, after tax, and then projecting your income, projecting, okay, right now I make $3,000 a month. What is that going to be after inflation in 20 years? Do I need to bring home $4,000 a month? Well, my Social Security statement only says I'm going to get $1,500 a month if I start taking it 62, maybe a little bit more at 67. And then we're in that generation where Social Security may or may not be there. So that's a real thing. So if we don't get ahead of this and really curb our spending and start really getting super focused about saving in a serious way. I mean, this is honestly, you know, COVID has slowed down a lot of folks, but I really feel like, you know, you're spending less. You're not going out, you're not entertaining, right? You're not eating out as much. You're not, you know, putting gas in your car as much. You're not parking, you know, paying $20 parking downtown. I mean, we could really get ahead during this time if we could just discipline ourselves, but we easily get distracted, and it's kind of like you have to make a decision. You mentally have to hit the reset button every day, because if you know people are really struggling, you know, and you know right now we're getting ready to have Thanksgiving, what, in a week and a half, and folks are getting ready, you know, to do some real silly stuff. I'm just saying, you might as well go ahead and get that policy, because if you got 5 folks coming to your house, you know, putting that same spoon in the macaroni and cheese, I'm gonna need you to put a glove on it. I mean, I'm gonna need that. I'm gonna need you just to virtually stay home. And this is how I honestly feel, Tiffany. This is how I feel. And I don't understand why, why are we doing this? This is a pandemic. We've never been in a pandemic before. We can't, pretend like it's just, oh, pandemic, that's nothing. This is real. And so, this again, getting back to my point, we really have to maximize this time. We may never get this kind of time back again. So it's what you do with your time, and to be able to have these conversations around, how do I make sure my family's protected? How do I make sure I'm good when it's time for me to sit down and retire? How do I make sure my kids can still, live a prosperous life? How can I create additional income, right? How can I, make sure that I'm structuring my financial situation where, I can really come up. This can be a come up for a lot of us. So it's really just getting yourself in the right mindset and not getting sucked into, a lot of the other stuff. And you just have to keep your mind clear. You really do. So this event, I'm so thankful that we've had so many people pop on tonight and join. I can't wait to do more of this. Tiffany, you're the bomb.com. Give it up for Tiffany, Veney, Esquire.
Yes.
And I put our information in the chat. But if you're watching, I'm gonna say on Facebook. So Tiffany, your email address is Tiffany at the Griffin firm -PLLC.com, correct?
Yep.
And my email address is monicasmith1021@gmail.com. I think I also put the phone number in here. You have a 855 number?
We do indeed. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the number that is showing online for the Griffin firm is 855-574-8481.
Yes, ma'am. That's us. You can find us yourestateplanningattorney.com.
Awesome. Okay. Well, it's 7:56. We did an hour and a half. We did good.
We had really good questions. I'm really proud of y'all for showing up and
Being engaged and really taking that first step of getting that education and trying to figure out, how do I do this thing? How do I make sure we're good? So clap it up for everyone who's here.
Okay, so we're definitely gonna sign off, but again, stay safe, wear your mask. Happy Thanksgiving to you all. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
And, we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Monica.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one, y'all. Good night.
Good night.